live, and we've got this going, and it's going live, and we are live, and it looks like Count Dooku has entered the chat. Oh my goodness, ladies and gentlemen, Count Dooku has entered the chat on YouTube. May the fourth be with y'all. I tell you what, who saw that Kenobi trailer today? Like, whoa! Like, I mean, come on, like, yeah. So that was, I mean, that stuff was like, wow, okay, where Obi-Wan Kenobi, you know, he's like all, oh, when the boy gets old enough, he's gonna have to be trained, and Uncle Owen's all like he trained his father. Oh, you know, that kind of thing. It was just like, okay, I'm very excited about seeing the Kenobi series. So, ladies and gentlemen, tonight's broadcast is going to be focusing on it's going to be focusing on the 20th century. So we're going to give priority to the 20th century tonight. And so as far as that goes, I'm going to be taking some questions there. Let's hear a quick word from our sponsor. Okay, so remember, ladies and gentlemen, Romulus Euro is available at the App Store. And look, y'all got it to number 8 in education. Now, I still need to do something about this. It's not, that is a screenshot from Romulus A Push Review. But the topics, the Renaissance, the Reformation, the Age of Absolutism, industry and isms, all of that stuff is there. So that's something that is on the App Store and at Google Play as well. So let's see if we can get that to number 1 before tomorrow night. So with that, also I want to note, I'm going to be doing a couple of premium sessions. The Salon review, there is a Salon review tonight, and that's basically a small group review that's going to be limited to 30 participants. So right now, 4 people are signed up. It is a small group review, and so that's going to be at 9:30 p.m. tonight. Now, remember, I'm going to be broadcasting publicly again at 8 p.m. Eastern Thursday night. Now, also, this is all at crowdcast.io/Tom Richey. There is also the Art of Euro. That's going to be tomorrow night at 9:30. Y'all don't want to miss that. So with that, we've got a couple premium reviews, and you just go to crowdcast.io/Tom Richey. All right, so let's go ahead and start. We've got a question about the Soviet Union, the Bolshevik Revolution. Okay, so let me go ahead, and I'm going to share some notes. All right, so these are some tutoring notes here that I've got that I'm going to share on the Russian Revolution. Okay, so let me go ahead and share these in the chat. And, you know, so we're going to take a look here at the Russian Revolution, which this is something that tends to get shorted a little bit. Hey, Miss Matthews. So as far as that goes, you know, the Russian Revolution gets shorted, and I'm saying that. I mean, I tend to short it in my class. Okay, so that's one of those things that we see here. So we see some Romulus is goated. Thank y'all so much. Thank y'all so much. All right, so shout out to Mr. Lennon's period 4 class in California. Thank you, Elsa, for liking my shirt. Now, remember, ladies and gentlemen, as well, I'm going to be doing some Instagram shout outs at Tom Richey. That's going to be happening once in a while during this broadcast. So the thing is, we have a question about Lenin's new economic policy. Now, what I've done here is I've shared some tutoring notes on the Russian Revolution, okay? And so basically, let me just kind of go through the Russian Revolution, because it's something that, you know, tends to get kind of passed over. You know, you tend to go to like the World War I, and then the Russian Revolution happened, and then, you know, you go on with the 1920s and the interwar period. So, you know, I go into the contextualization. So when you think about like Europe around 1850, Central and Western Europe, you know, they are industrialized or rapidly industrializing, urbanized increasingly. You know, then they have institutions of representative government. Russia has really none of these things in 1850. That Russia is only beginning to industrialize. Oh, I've still got George Washington Cross of the Delaware here. Let me switch paintings. Got to get the wall out of A-push mode there. All right. So with that, you know, Russia is, you know, although Peter the Great did his part around the late 17th, early 18th centuries to westernize Russia, you know, Russia is, more than a century after Peter the Great is lagging behind. Okay. So as far as that goes, yep, we've got the Van Gogh here. And so with that, the Russian Revolution, like the 19th century, okay, Russia doesn't really get impacted by the revolutions of 1848 1948. Now, one thing that we'll note here, and this is in the course and exam description, we've got Marxism versus anarchism. Okay, so Marxism versus anarchism. Now, both Marxism and anarchism, they are both socialist movements whose goal was to overthrow the state. Now, Marxists, they want to overthrow the state and replace it with a new centralized communist state, where the anarchists want to overthrow the state and replace it basically with nothing. They want to replace it with a system of voluntary cooperation. Now, as far as that goes, y'all were talking in the chat. I see some people talking in the chat about scientific socialism versus utopian socialism. Okay, so Marx, he differentiated his form of socialism by saying my socialism is scientific. Okay, now the thing is that Marxism is based on something of a flawed science, but I think it's not that there's no validity to it whatsoever. I mean, there certainly is when Marx talks about class struggle. You have through history, repeated class struggles. I think that Marx is identifying that, quite properly there. But with that, Marx, he says that, his system is going to put an end to class struggles. Now, that doesn't seem to be the case. When you look at communist states, it creates a new ruling class in the bureaucracy. But as far as that goes, anarchism, which Marxism doesn't really sound all that great to me. But when I hear anarchism, at first glance, it's like, what? We wouldn't have to have like any centralized government. But are you really going to have that all over the world and nobody's going to then form a government and take you over? Anarchism is something of a pipe dream. Okay. But with that, Marxists and anarchists, they both favored violent revolution. Now, as far as that goes, Marx said, okay, and this is something that sets Marx apart from Lenin, is that the revolution will be a spontaneous and large-scale insurrection led by the urban masses, okay? Whereas the anarchists, they believe more is that, isolated acts of terror orchestrated by small groups of revolutionaries. And then we note here opposition to reformist liberalism, that both Marxists and anarchists, these are radicals. They do not like liberal reform, which liberal reforms are typically based on preserving elements of the existing social order and government and reforming them. So anarchism and Marxism, they both want to replace, not reform. And so the Marxists, now they will eventually take over Russia, but we want to note here that the anarchists through most of the 19th century, they were much more prevalent among the radical socialist elements in Russia. Now, Alexander II was a reforming, liberalizing czar. Alexander II, there are some things that you can kind of compare Alexander the Peter the Great, that Alexander emancipated the serfs. He allowed free movement of peasants. Now, this is something that in Western Europe, serfdom was like a relic of the Middle Ages. But in Russia, around 1860, it was still there. And so, he supported industrialization, started planning the building of railroads. So the Trans-Siberian Railroad, the plans are hatched during his time. He organized like local governments, these zemstvos. Now, also, it's said that when he was assassinated by terrorists in 1881, he was devising a plan for a state Duma. Like, Alexander believed that Russia needs some kind of representative body. Now, how strong of a representative body, we have no way of knowing, okay? But as far as that goes, he's assassinated by terrorists, so we'll never know. Now, Alexander III, he abandoned his father's political liberalism, but he still continued to support modernization and the building of the railroads. Also, Alexander III was known as the peacemaker because there were no new wars during his time. Now, Nicholas II, a lot like Louis XVI, just the wrong guy for the time, okay? But in 1894, Nicholas II becomes czar. And, of course, the Russo-Japanese War is a disaster for Russia. This is the first time that a non-Western power has defeated a European power. And so you've got, first of all, that embarrassment for Russia and then a financial disaster. Now, when we're talking about the Russian Revolution, what we need to realize is there are actually three different revolutions, okay? There is the Revolution of 1905, which takes Russia from an absolute monarchy to a constitutional monarchy. The February Revolution of 1917, which takes Russia from constitutional monarchy to a constitutional republic. And then the October Revolution, where you go from a constitutional republic to a communist state, okay? And so with that, the Russian Revolution of 1905, a couple of things there. The Bloody Sunday Massacre, where you've got this workers' demonstration and the military fires into this crowd in St. Petersburg. Lots of people killed, thousands arrested. Now, Nicholas's, government is almost toppled, but what Nicholas does is he signs, and a lot of Octobers here, but he signs the October Manifesto, no relation to the October Revolution, okay, kind of the opposite there. So Nicholas, he authorized that Russia is now going to be a constitutional monarchy, and there will be a state Duma, so Russia for the first time will have some kind of constitution. Now, the thing is, that like Louis XVI, a lot of times there will be comparisons between Louis XVI and and Nicholas II. And so as far as that, goes, this is something that, both of them are, just inept, and they fight the progress of reform. And so Nicholas does retain this absolute veto power. So both of them, like neither one was a particularly strong ruler, both resented losing absolute monarchy, and both butted heads with the legislative body through the use of vetoes. So World War I is, now, of course, there are going to be different, different viewpoints of this, but from a historiographical point of view, was Russia already heading toward inevitable revolution and collapse? Or did World War I break the czarist government? Dr. Marx at Clemson, when I heard him give a talk, seemed to be on the side that World War I broke the czarist government, that there were a lot of things that were actually going quite well in Russia. One of the things he noted was Russia had a stable currency at that time. And usually when there's a revolution, there's some kind of currency or financial crisis, and that wasn't happening. Now, of course, World War I changed that. Now, in 1917, the February Revolution, that is where sorry, too many Alexanders here, but this is where Nicholas abdicates from the throne. And what happens is there is a provisional government formed, of this Russian Republic. Now, what happens here is the provisional government makes the mistake that's not going to be repeated by Lenin of attempting to keep fighting World War I. While they're trying to organize a new government. And that basically they're fighting a war against Germany, which is a much more technologically advanced and better armed enemy. That is going very, very poorly for Russia. And so, with that, like if you look at World War I, Eastern Front. Okay, what you've got here is basically you've got Germany on one side. Just to show you this, that in October of 1917, notice that Russia, they've got twice as many infantry. They've got, 2.5 times as many cavalry. Now, the thing is, this doesn't matter as much as the guns. What technologies are you bringing? So the Germans have a slight advantage in light guns, and note that they've got twice as many heavy guns on the Eastern Front as the Russians. So Germany, they have become Europe's preeminent industrial power. And so when you look at casualties and losses, you see where the Germans, they lose 300,000 Germans are killed on the Eastern Front, whereas you've got, over 2 million Russians that are killed, millions of Russians captured, like dang. And then so as far as that goes, I mean, you've got more Romanians dying on the Russian side than you've got Germans dying here. And so with that, that's where basically Russia is taking is taking some punishment here. And so from there, we'll just note here that that's not going so well for Russia, but the provisional government tries to keep fighting, like a fight that they're really not winning and have no chance of winning. I guess they think they can hold out, long enough for the, for the Western Front to end. But so the October Revolution, which results in communism, this is something where it leads to the eventual establishment of the Soviet Union. So Lenin's government, what Lenin does is he says, I'm not going to make the same mistake of trying to organize a government and fight a war that I'm losing. And so Lenin, negotiates a very generous peace agreement with Germany. It's like basically telling Germany, here, take all the eastern, take all the western most parts of Russia. And so that's something that Lenin, negotiates the peace agreement, the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, and then gets out of the war. Now, we've talked about Marxism versus anarchism already. Now let's go into Marxism versus Leninism. So this is something where Lenin is updating Marx a bit. Okay, so as far as the similarities, why Leninism is a form of Marxism, they agree history is based on class struggle. The prevailing capitalist order represents the last stage of the class struggle. Marx and Lenin agree on that. The capitalist order will be overthrown by the working class in a violent revolution, establishing a communist society that'll get rid of class distinctions, ending the class struggle that has gone on throughout history. So then Marx says that remember, this is scientific socialism. Okay, so Marxism is a science, it is a process. Okay, there's this whole dialectic behind it, that a communist revolution can only happen when there's been a bourgeois revolution already. So in a place like Germany, Britain, France, where the bourgeoisie have already made themselves the dominant class, where in Russia, the old nobility is still, in control. Russia, according to Marx would say, Russia is not far enough along yet. And so Lenin says, I beg to differ. Okay, Lenin says that this is something that a communist revolution can happen regardless of whether there has been a bourgeois revolution or not. Okay, and so that's what we're looking at. What we're looking at here is Lenin says, look, Russia is eligible for a revolution here, and so with that, we see that Marx says that the process of this revolution, that this is going to happen naturally as the working class independently establishes, a class consciousness. So they're going to realize the extent to which they're being exploited, and they'll rise up on their own. Marx gives the working class a lot of credit. Lenin does not. Lenin is looking back on decades, since Marx, and he's getting kind of impatient. And he says, look, the working class is not going to independently develop a sense of class consciousness, that they will compromise with reformist liberals. And they don't want, they're not going to independently think about a communist revolution. So Lenin says they need the help of a revolutionary vanguard, basically a group of professional revolutionaries, of more educated people that will help them develop a sense of class consciousness. So Marx says the ideal setting for a communist revolution is somewhere like Britain or Germany, whereas Russia, possibly Lenin says, look, this can happen in Russia. And so Lenin is less scientific in his, in his approach, that he's like, look, we can make this happen. And that's not Marxism. Okay, so the thing is, it's a form of Marxism. It is a corollary, but it's something that is related to Marxism. But there are like doctrinaire Marxists who say this is not Marxism, and it is not pure Marxism, which is why we often call it Leninism or Marxism-Leninism. So then, when Lenin takes control, to answer your question, war communism. Okay, so when we think at first, Lenin's like, let's do the war communism thing. And so there will be complete centralization and state control of all industries, no private enterprise. And so what we see here is Lenin is going for complete communism, a complete abolition of private enterprise. And so war communism is a complete economic disaster. Surprise, surprise. And it called, that calls for a change in course. And so Lenin, kind of like Bismarck, shows himself to be flexible, because remember, Bismarck was not a big fan of socialism. So but he does, in order, he thinks, to try to, take the wind out of the socialist sails, he starts the first welfare state in Germany. Old age pensions, accident insurance, health insurance. And Bismarck believed that by implementing a modest welfare state, Bismarck is avoiding a socialist uprising and socialist control. That it's better to bring in elements of socialism and still have the control of, conservatives controlling the government. Now, Lenin, with the new economic policy, he said major industries will continue to be owned by the government under the NEP, but petty capitalism, small business enterprise, was still going to be allowed to exist. So as far as that goes, I mentioned we've got the Salon review tonight, which is going to start at about 9:30. And that is an example of petty capitalism. Okay, that is a premium review. I'm not running a major factory or a central bank or anything, banking, anything like that. It's just petty capitalism, like small time capitalism. And so as far as that goes, that, the NEP, Lenin is not coming around and saying, like, I like capitalism. But basically, in a way, maybe he's nodding toward Marx. Like, maybe Russia was not quite ready for a full-on communist revolution and still needs to develop a bit more economically. And so with that policy, the new economic policy, continues from 1921 to 1928. And that is when Stalin, moves away from the NEP and starts going back to the the collectivization of agriculture and that sort of thing. So, and then also Stalin is developing industries. Now, Lenin is against capitalism, but then Lenin, sponsors this. The NEP represents a form of state capitalism. And basically Lenin's like, look, it's no use having a communist revolution if everything's just going to collapse. And so, maybe we can try to implement full communism later when Russia is more ready for it, per se. But, surprise, surprise. I mean, communism just doesn't seem to work no matter how much time you give it. That there's always, if you look at like, China, which is the preeminent communist country today, that they have integrated a great deal. Like, China does not run on a communist model. It's really in a lot of ways state capitalism. It's like heavily regulated state capitalism. And so both Bismarck and Lenin are willing to kind of make a deal with the devil in order to stay in power. And so with that, when we think about some of the things here, I've got some other things that you can note here. Then also Stalinism. Okay, that's something that I think is worth noting as well when we think about the elements of Stalinism. So what makes Stalinism distinct as well? So Stalin, one of the things that is very early on for Stalin is he announces this doctrine of socialism in one country. Now, Lenin had maintained, along with Marx, it's like, communism is inherently internationalist. And so you can't have a lonely, isolated communist country, that there has to be, there has to be other communist countries. The goal is for the whole world to be communist. Now, Stalin says socialism in one country. I am no longer going to support a worldwide communist revolution, that I'm going to strengthen communism within the Soviet Union. Now, this starts to lead to, some Western democracies beginning to recognize the Soviet Union when Stalin, renounces this doctrine of worldwide communist revolution. Now, Stalin is also favoring rapid industrialization. So state-supported industrialization through the implementation of 5-year plans, which these 5-year plans, that's what separates communism from economic liberalism. When you think about economic liberalism, laissez-faire, there is no economic planning. So Stalin is using these 5-year plans, which are pretty successful at first, but they become less successful as it goes on. Now, collectivization of agriculture. So Stalin, basically, forces peasants onto collective farms, and he is basically going to war with the landowning peasants, these kulaks, as he calls them. He calls them fists or tight-fisted, that these, he calls them kulaks. These are people who are greedy. They're holding on to their land. They're trying to assert their individuality. In Ukraine, Stalin resorts to a forced famine, what they call the terror famine or Holodomor in Ukraine, Stalin basically sends people to go in there and confiscate the grain and bring it to Russia. And so there are millions of Ukrainians that died during this time. And so, he eliminated them by forced starvation, relocation, and let's not forget about the Gulag. Now, Stalin also favored a cult of personality. And that's where basically, he not only a cult of personality around himself, but a cult of personality around Lenin. And of course, Stalin is, selling himself to the Russian people as Lenin's chosen successor, which that's not really something that we can be sure about. But Stalin wants people to know, Lenin, Stalin, Leningrad, Stalingrad, these renaming of cities for Lenin and Stalin, having these cults of personality. Now, also, political repression. Okay, so basically his opponents in the military and the bureaucracy, like 1 million people dying in the 1930s, peaking during Stalin's Great Purge. So with that, this is something that, going from there, I answered those things. Okay, can I go over revolution? Shout out for my friend Carson Webster. It's his birthday. Happy birthday, Carson Webster. All right, good to see that. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Kastner, best AP Euro teacher, we love you. Okay, Tiffany just realized how to spell Holodomor. We've got let's see. Took this last year. All right, Glitchtastic. I'm glad I could help you. With that. So with that, let me go ahead and look at some other questions here. Can we talk about? Let's see. These are topics. The Korean War and the Vietnam War. These are more U.S. history topics. Okay. Yeah, I don't think that we're going to see a lot of that on AP Euro. So if any at all. Okay. So as far as that goes, Dylan, that's very interesting. I may go, I'll probably keep this at about an hour. So I don't see any problem going to 9:10, especially if we've got a few more signups for the, we just had somebody else sign up for the Salon review. Okay, so if we're getting some Salon review signups, I can keep going for a while. I'm not going to turn this off right at 9. So thank you to whoever just signed up for the Salon review. Okay, someone is asking me to go into European integration. Okay, so as far as that goes, let's talk about European integration. Okay, so the European Economic Community, there are all these abbreviations. Okay, but I'm just going to take off for a little ride. European Economic Community. Okay, so when we look at the European Economic Community, it's an organization that from 1958 actually wasn't even disbanded until 2009. That this is something that basically created a common market in Europe. So the European Economic Community in 1993, it stood, I don't like when they do that with a globe. I just want a good, clean map of Europe, okay? So when we look at the European Economic Community, the first members in 1957, you've basically got Italy, France, Germany, and the so-called Benelux countries, okay? Belgium, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands, okay? Yeah, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg. And so you've got 6 countries, 3 larger countries, and 3 smaller countries. Now, it expands. Now, Britain at first, you note here, and this is something that kind of informs Brexit, in the late 1950s, Britain declined to join the European Economic Community, which is basically, an economic union of Europe to take away to take away any kind of tariffs or anything like that. You also hear about like the European coal and steel community, which is something that, they are basically sharing economies. They are integrating their economies together with the view of creating a European economy. Now, note here that when we're looking at this, we see here that that what happens here is basically Charles de Gaulle, or Charles de Gaulle. Okay, he was the president of France. He was also, remember, during World War II, the leader of the Free French Army. Well, when Britain tried to come into when Britain tried to come into the European Economic Community, Charles de Gaulle decided that, he vetoed British membership. Okay, so as far as that, goes, that, when Britain, the first time Britain tried to get into the European Economic Community, Charles de Gaulle vetoed it. He said basically, Britain was a Trojan horse for the United States getting a seat at the table. Now, finally, you saw in 1973, Britain enters the European Economic Community. Now, then you've got the Maastricht Treaty, or Maastricht Treaty, because it's a Dutch term. The Treaty of Maastricht, okay, is basically, it's a sign. Now, one thing to note here is the European Union. This is really about the same time as the fall of communism. That this is something that, it was signed in 1992. It took effect in 1993. Now, note that there have been some amended treaties that we see here, that the European Union is kind of expanded, but the European Union, it takes this economic union, okay? So basically the Europeans at first began integrating their economy. Okay, and so we see here, I want to go to, this is basically the southernmost point of the Netherlands. And so they see here that this is where the treaty was signed. And so this is the first time that these European countries are agreeing to not only an economic union, but also a political union. Now, note, this is something that starts mostly with like Western and Central European countries, Greece being the only like original member that is from Eastern Europe. So when we see here, this is, you've got 12 member states here of this original European Union. And the European Union has a number of features. It continues the economic union. So basically, it's a continuation of the European Economic Community, but it's also going into a political union as well. Okay, so just to show you something here, that there are a few things that we want to take note of about the European Union. Now, it doesn't destroy nations. Nations are still there, but at the same time, you do have today a European Parliament. And let's see here. So we've got, kind of a map of the European Union there, and they've got some interesting, maps and things. Let me just go directly to the, to the pages here. Okay. So one thing I want to note here is the Eurozone. Okay. So the Eurozone, one of the things here is to use a common currency, the Eurozone or the Euro area. So note, just because you're in the European Union does not mean that you use the euro necessarily. Okay, so we see here, these are countries that use the euro. Now, some of these countries aren't even members of the European Union. And that's what's interesting here, that you've got different, different groups there. But the Eurozone, these are countries that are using the euro. Okay, and then the other thing here is the Schengen area, okay, or Schengen area, it's a written test, right? So the Schengen area, this is a place where you've got basically free travel within Europe. So when you think about this, that the European Union, it's an economic union. So the currency union, which note that Britain was never part of the Eurozone. Britain never adopted the euro. It stayed on the pound. It never entered the Schengen area. Like Britain always kept its own own customs. Like when you try to come into Britain, you're going to have to go through customs. Now, note here today that Ireland is not in the Schengen area either. Okay, so basically, you know, Britain and Ireland, they still have border controls, so they're not in the Schengen area. Now, what we note here is that you know, you have here that EU members here are in the EU, but they're not in the Schengen area. Okay, so Romania is a member of the EU, but you know, they'll elect people to the European Parliament, but they are not in the Schengen area. If you want to go into Romania, you're going to have to go through customs. Whereas if you fly into Amsterdam, there's nothing stopping you from going to Berlin or to Paris or to Rome. They're not going to check your passport again because you're in this area where there's freedom of movement. But again, you know, Ireland is an EU member that is not in that area. Now, it looks like Romania and Bulgaria and Croatia will eventually get there. I remember during the summer of 2020, Croatia said, we're going to open ourselves up for tourism, but they could do that. They did it against the EU recommendations, but it wasn't that big of a deal because Croatia is not in the Schengen area. And so that's something that you want to note in terms of the European Union: freedom of movement, an economic union of currency. And then, of course, you know, some, you know, while there are still nations, we wouldn't say that it's gotten rid of nations, but there are some rules and regulations that come with being in the European Union, which part of that was the motivation for Brexit. That, you know, a lot of British people, they didn't want to have all of those EU regulations anymore. And so with that, that's kind of, you know, kind of what we're looking at as far as European integration. Now, one thing I want to note here is another term, Euroscepticism. Okay, so, and we spell it like the British way. You know, Euroscepticism here is basically, you know, the idea that the EU, it's critical of the EU and European integration. And so Euroscepticism can either take on the form of hard Euroscepticism. That means that you want out of the European Union, and you know, or soft Euroscepticism, that you believe that the European Union's powers need to be scaled back, that the integration needs to kind of be put on hold, that there needs to be like some reform of the European Union. So if we look at, for example, like you know, Marine Le Pen. Okay, so Marine Le Pen, who is, you know, the leader of the National Rally Party, formerly the National Front, you know, she just, you know, lost the presidential election, but, you know, got the highest showing that her party has ever gotten. But basically, she was, you know, in the previous election, a hard Eurosceptic, saying that France needs to get out of the European Union. That's not something that's palatable to most French people. And so, you know, in the previous campaign, she kind of transitioned herself to soft Euroscepticism, like critical of the EU, but not, you know, not favoring getting out of the EU. So note that Euroscepticism, you know, exists with there. So are you, yeah, so a bit confused right now? Yeah, you know, when you're talking about European integration, it can be, you know, it can be a bit, you know, a bit much there. So with that, let's go ahead. We're asking about revolutions in Eastern Europe, okay? So first of all, let's think about, like, you know, when we think about the Eastern Bloc, okay, the Eastern Bloc, the Hungarian Revolution of 1956, which I don't know why they call it the revolution or why it's not like a revolt. I never can get that. And the Prague Spring, okay, and then we think about the, you know, the fall of the Berlin Wall, okay, so that's something. And we also want to note the Brezhnev Doctrine, okay, so let me just run in here and get something. I'm going to get some slides here. Let's see. So that is Cold War and contemporary Europe, Soviet leaders. Okay, so let's go ahead and get that queued up as well. All right, we got a few, you know, we got a few more folks that have signed up. We've got another participant in the Salon review. I'm looking forward to doing this small group review with some of you later tonight. And so, you know, make sure that you got your questions ready, and we'll do a little small group session. All right. So as far as that goes, never heard of the Brezhnev doctrine. Red sus. All right. So yes, I would agree with that. Okay. So as far as that goes, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and first of all, the Eastern Bloc. Okay. So the Eastern Bloc, these are countries like at the Yalta Conference. Stalin said, "Look, Germany now has fought 2 wars with Russia, and it's time for that to, it's time for that to be over. That I need a sphere of influence." Okay, so basically, when you look at the dark red, these are basically like, this is the Soviet Union before the war. Now you see that the Soviet Union expands. Russia actually annexes this little enclave, which is still there today, between Poland and Lithuania. So what happens here is there's some land taken away from Germany that goes to Poland. And these countries here in the pink, these are the Eastern Bloc countries. Okay, so Romania, Bulgaria, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, which is today 2 countries, East Germany, and Poland. Okay, now Yugoslavia at first, but then Yugoslavia basically leaves. Marshal Tito, actually some Marshall Plan money goes to him. I guess they figured you're Marshall, and it's called the Marshall Plan, so let's go ahead and do that. But this is before the Tito-Stalin split. Okay, so, and that's probably not going to come up on your exam, but you do want to know the Eastern Bloc. So Stalin says he needs a sphere of influence. Roosevelt and Churchill are like, okay. I mean, it's really Stalin. They've laid down a lot of lives in World War II. Now, the Eastern Bloc countries, Churchill, says, I believe in 1946 in a speech in the United States, an iron curtain has descended across Europe. And so basically what Stalin has done is he has basically installed Soviet-friendly puppet governments in these areas. Now, here and there's going to be a revolt. The Hungarian Revolution, which for whatever, I call it, the Hungarian uprising makes a little bit more sense to me, because typically, when you look at a revolution, that's something that's successful. Now, what I love about this is the Hungarians. What had happened here is their flag. This is their traditional flag. They've got this, this tricolor flag that goes back, to the 19th century. And so what happened here is when the Soviets, turned Hungary into an Eastern Bloc country, what happened here from 1949 to 56, you see here where the Soviets have got their red star for communism, their grain here, and the hammer and sickle for communist labor. Well, in order to protest, like during this armed uprising, the Hungarians, they start cutting a circle, they just start cutting that out of their flag. And so you saw where you saw that flag, where, Hungary is just basically, that's their flag, that they are reclaiming their national flag. And one thing, although, the Hungarian, uprising or Hungarian revolt or revolution or whatever we're going to call it, although it ended up being crushed by Soviet tanks, you do see that, well, gosh, that's okay. But a nationalist uprising there, and this is where you see there are Hungarian tanks, but then there are some Soviet tanks. Okay, the Soviets come in here, and that's the end of that. But as a result of the Hungarian Revolution, they get their flag back. Okay, so the Hungarian flag will just go back to their national tricolor. So that is one of the revolts there. Now, also, you've got the Prague Spring, okay, which the Prague Spring is in 1968, which is a pretty much, 1968 is the same year where you've got like the student protest in France, you've got the Vietnam War protest in the United States. So it's a pretty tumultuous year in general. And so you see here where the Czechoslovaks, they are carrying their national flag. Again, nationalism, and there is a burning Soviet tank there. Now, one thing as far as that goes, there was what happened. You've got from January to August that they elected a liberalizer. You don't want to try to remember his name. I can barely remember it. I probably couldn't spell it. I can recognize his name, but it's like it's some, Czech name. And, it's just not going to be easy to remember. But they elected somebody who said, he talked about socialism with a human face. Okay, so this idea of socialism with a human face, where basically he's like, look, that there should be like freedom of the press and freedom of speech, freedom of movement, moving toward a consumer goods economy. So the thing is while he's not renouncing socialism to the Soviet Union, this seems like, hey, Czechoslovakia is becoming capitalist. So the Soviets bring in, they bring in tanks. Okay, so we see, we see here the Soviets will put this down, and then there's actually a young man. Let's see. What was it? Was it Jan? I forget. Jan Pollock. Okay, he was a college student in 1969. Jan Pollock, he sets himself on fire to protest, like the Soviets bring back the repression of free speech. And so Jan Pollock pours gasoline on himself and burns himself in order to protest communism. Now, this is very powerful. There are lots of poems, lots of songs. Lamb of God actually has like a heavy metal song, about Jan Pollock. I believe it's called Torches. But there are lots of you see here where there is, there's a memorial to him there. And it's exactly like you see there where you can go to the site where he burned himself, and you can, when you look here, that exactly 20 years later is when you've got the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. And that's the same time where you've got the Velvet Revolution, the so-called Gentle Revolution. Sounds a lot like the Glorious Revolution from England. And so, exactly 20 years later, Czechoslovakia finally gets its, gets its nationhood back. But yeah, you can see that memorial to Jan Pollock, who decided that he would rather, die than live in a communist country where he couldn't speak freely. And, that's something that, there is his funeral, and that turns into a huge protest. So, it's just the courage of this young man, who decided that he would rather die than live in a country that is not free, a country that is occupied, by, Soviet communists. And so with that, you've also got, in 1989, same time, the fall of the Berlin Wall. Now, with that, what we want to note here is when we look at Soviet leaders, okay, so there is Brezhnev. Somebody said they've literally never heard of the Brezhnev Doctrine. So Khrushchev, one thing about Khrushchev I've seen come up, the program of de-Stalinization. Okay, Khrushchev, he criticizes in his secret speech. He doesn't come out and criticize Stalin openly, but in a speech to communist leaders that was not released to the public, he said that we've got to abandon this cult of personality that was set up by Stalin. Now, Brezhnev, the Brezhnev Doctrine, this is something where basically, in response to the Prague Spring, and basically to justify what the Soviet Union did in Czechoslovakia, he said when forces that are hostile to socialism try to turn the development of some socialist country toward capitalism, it becomes not only a problem of the country concerned, but a common problem and concern of all socialist countries. So if you think about like the NATO strategy of containment, it's almost like reverse containment. Like you think about the Truman Doctrine, that he's going to stop communism from spreading. And we see that Brezhnev says, we're not just going to sit back and let these Eastern Bloc countries leave the Eastern Bloc. And so with that, the Prague Spring, and you see that that's, the Soviet T-55 coming into Poland, to make sure that they're behaving themselves. Now, Gorbachev, who takes over in the 1980s, he tries to reform the Soviet Union. It's kind of like, when we talked about Lenin and Bismarck, like Gorbachev is certainly not a liberal or any kind of right-winger, but he realizes that the Soviet Union's on the verge of collapse. So he reforms, with glasnost and perestroika. Now, glasnost, openness, the way I remember this is glasnost. You know, you can look through glass, you can see through it. And perestroika, this restructuring. And he relaxes censorship. Now, he thinks, you know, the government needs to be open to constructive criticism. Now, you relax censorship, you know, for your messed up government, like for the first time in like, you know, 60, 70 years. And all of a sudden, like you are going to see like the floodgates open. Okay. So this is something that, you know, it basically, he was trying to save the Soviet Union, and it really just exacerbated the collapse of the Soviet Union. So that's something that, you know, hopefully that answered some of your, you know, some of your questions there. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be here for, you know, for a few more minutes. I think I'm going to go into Thatcherism. Okay, Thatcher and Thatcherism. So as far as that goes, her class is that confident, Tiffany, I suppose. You know what? I actually, let's see. So yeah, they're not that confident. They're not watching this video, Olivia says, because they're going to make a 1. So with that, let me note people who have joined, you know, today here. So this is something, let's see, we've got Destructive Granny 364, Declan 6332, Max Tav, we've got Peister Dylan, Oak Shields ___05, and let's see, we've got all right, and I think actual student alert over there, possibly. All right, so and then we had Kayla, who was probably not on this broadcast, but you know, did follow probably in the last broadcast there. All right, so as far as that goes there, let's go ahead and talk for a bit about Thatcherism. And again, I will be doing a very small group salon review. Like, you know, there are only like 6 signed up right now. You know, I'm totally, you know, I'll be hanging out with 6 people for an hour and answering, you know, whatever questions they have. So I'm pretty excited about that. So feel free to join us, you know, if you would like to do that. So going from, you know, going from there, let's see, let me just go ahead and note Thatcher and Thatcherism, just you know, real quick here. So Margaret Thatcher, let's see what I did there. Okay, so Margaret Thatcher and Thatcherism. Now, one thing that we'll note here is, you know, after World War II, you see in Western Europe, although they are, you know, capitalist, and, you know, in Germany, you've got like the economic miracle, so to speak. You know, even though their economies are based on capitalism, they're still bringing in a lot of state control of industries. When Britain is you know, under the control of the Labor Party, it's basically like the Labor Party is, you know, expanding, you know, labor rights. It is expanding government control of heavy industry. Now, Margaret Thatcher, you know, she's basically, she gets her a nickname early on, the Milk Snatcher. Like, you know, in order to cut the budget, you know, Margaret Thatcher basically takes free milk out of the public schools. And so now one thing there, she gets criticized for it. But another thing we want to note here is that Thatcher is very much an economic liberal. It's like, buy your own milk. Okay, it's like milk is a product. Milk is not like you know, something just grows on trees for free. Milk is something that, you know, if you want milk, you can buy it. Okay, that's very, you know, economically liberal. So Margaret Thatcher, otherwise known as the Iron Lady, the first female head of government in European history, and the longest serving British prime minister of the 20th century. Now, when we think about Margaret Thatcher and Thatcherism, first of all, economic liberalism, free market economics. The context of Thatcher coming in was the so-called Winter of Discontent, which was an especially cold winter in 1978 and 79. And so there were unions that took advantage of these things. And these unions included like the Grave Diggers Union. They're like, you know what? We're just going to go on strike. We're not going to dig graves. The Garbage Collectors Union decided they're going to go on strike, and there's like trash piled up in the cities. And so you see that the time is right for somebody to come in and challenge, the unions and bring about liberal reform. So basically, Thatcherism, a very big proponent, Thatcher, a very big proponent of market economics, economic liberalism, as we call it in European terms, and privatization, battling trade unions. She was a social conservative, someone who favored strong families, traditional morality. So basically, she combines economic liberalism with social conservatism in a lot of ways, very similarly to Ronald Reagan. So she was an anti-communist, very cooperative with Reagan, and also a Eurosceptic. As long as Thatcher was, was prime minister, Britain did not join the EU. And I think that's part of what, ended up pulling her down as the leader of the Conservative Party, because there were people who were, pro-European, and so, Thatcher famously gave a statement during her prime minister's question. She said, "No, no, no." Basically, we're not going to give up our currency. We're not going to give up our sovereignty. No, no, no. So economic liberalism, anti-communism, social conservatism, Euroscepticism, and law and order. Now, economically, what we call neoliberalism, okay, which Milton Friedman, an economist, said the thing that people do not recognize is that Margaret Thatcher is not, in terms of belief, a Tory. She is a 19th century liberal, okay? Like basically someone, she noted herself, "I would not mind betting that if Mr. Gladstone were alive today, the leader of the Liberal Party in the late 19th century, he would apply to join the Conservative Party." So there you see Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan. They were very, very close associates, getting along very well, and also, being of the same stripe politically. So as far as that goes, that's a little introduction to Thatcherism. So with that, golden rays of glorious sunshine. Do we have Mercy watching? We got some young people from Mercy and Long Island watching tonight, talking about a ray of sunshine. All right. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, let's see here that, I want to remind y'all, we've got some people that have joined us. So I want to remind y'all, there are a few things here, that Romulus Euro, that is an app that's available at the App Store. Y'all brought it to number 8 in education. Thank y'all very much. And so number 8 in education, Romulus Euro. Now it's at the App Store. If you've got an Android phone, it's on Google Play. Okay, so Romulus Euro is at the App Store and on Google Play. Now at 9:30, I'm going to have a Salon review. And right now, only 6 people. So it's really just, it's a great chance. It's a premium session. It's a chance to just sit down for an hour or so. And I'm going to be focusing on, your questions, like very small group kind of thing. Now, tomorrow, these are all at crowdcast.io/Tom Richey. I will be doing an art review at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. Now, the art review, I'm actually going to, people who purchase that, I'm going to give a link that you can share with, if you're a teacher, with your students, if you're a student, with your, with your friends. And so as far as that goes, those are some opportunities. But I'm going to be back here at 8:00 p.m. Tomorrow night for the night before Euro. So let's see if we've got any. Let me just check Instagram real quick. Don't see anything there. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, we'll see here. Banana and orange rhyme with one another. All right. Yeah, so I don't know, actually, Mr. Russell, as far as that goes, I'm enjoying the chat. I mean, oh, okay, yeah, Napoleon song is tomorrow, okay, but y'all are wanting a rap here. Y'all want a little rap to close the night. Okay, so let's just go ahead and, let's see. All right, so let's do Metternich rap, a little close off with a little Metternich rap. How about that? All right. Freestyle on Thatcherism. Now that would be really funny. Okay, so Metternich rap, ladies and gentlemen, close it off. What up, Europeans? It's the ladies' pick. Austrian Prince Clemens von Metternich. aristocracy's savior. I'm the man of the hour, gonna carefully restore Europe's balance of power. Eating nationalists for breakfast, liberals for my dinner, gonna be conservative if you want to be a winner. I'm the coachman of Europe, so you better hold your horses, because all the great powers are about to join forces. Napoleon thought he was too big for Elba, so we put him on a boat straight to St. Helena. Threatened European peace, so we sent him adrift. Shake the French Revolution off like Taylor Swift. Come on, Talleyrand, take a seat at the table, because Europe needs a France that is strong and stable. There's no need to punish France. I just want to keep order and restore the old 1791 borders. The liberals have ideas that they want to express, but I shut their mouths up when I censor the press. Stability between and within European states, it's the goal of this order that I'm trying to create. So join us in Vienna, where a Congress is in session. Together we can stop the revolution from progressing. This conservative order, no, it ain't gonna fall, because I build coalitions like Trump builds walls. That is on my SoundCloud. If you just go, Tom Richey SoundCloud, and of course, then of course the WAP parody. That video is online. It's called, on YouTube, and the music's on my SoundCloud. That is, of course, like Peter the Great and Louis the 14th. So. Yeah, so as far as that goes, the WAP parody, Peter the Great Russian Tsar might have heard of me, warm water port. Yeah, that's what I want to see. European tour going west, want to come with me. I'd rather die than have an overrunning me. Shave that beard, show me them lips. Better grab a hammer, because I'm building ships. Sailing down to Azov for a campaign. Turks couldn't hold the place after I came. I got a warm water port, ruling absolutely. Where French fashions in my court, ruling absolutely. Yes, that's me in that book you're reading, ruling absolutely. Defeating Charles the 12th of Sweden, ruling absolutely. When it comes to kings, I ain't mediocre. In Western Europe, I'm the power broker. Dutch Republic, I'm gonna run you over. With English allies, Treaty of Dover. Charles needed money. He was indebted. All those mistresses ruined his credit. Nobles with swords, I ain't sympathetic. I make new nobles, and they ain't genetic. Give me some art, make it Baroque. Edict of Nantes, I'm a revoke. I want one king, one law, one faith. That's what I said you can quote. Once fought a war over Spanish succession. The Grand Alliance don't like my aggression. They thought they could win, but they couldn't outshine me. Now at Utrecht, and now they want to sign me. Woo! All right, so ladies and gentlemen, and again, that's you can find that Warm Water Records. Okay, you can find that. We've got some stuff there. Yes, but if you just Google Tom Richey SoundCloud, you can listen to that stuff while you're preparing for your exam. Now remember, Romulus Euro is at the App Store, and I'm looking forward to getting together in about 18 minutes with a few of you that are in that Salon review. The rest of you, ladies and gentlemen, I will see you again at 8:00 p.m. For the night before Euro. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, it is all